Well, and as I've built out teams in my past and current even, whether it's at, EY or as an asset owner, like early on when I was an asset owner hiring folks for this OT stuff, OT word didn't exist. And I needed to find people that could fill the roles that I had. So it was really hard to find somebody that had the skill sets that I needed. So I was looking out to skilled, labor type folks, because I'm looking for a mindset. You think your network segmentation is at 80%. The pen test says you're at 10. This week I talked with Oren Niskin and Reynaldo Gonzalez on OT penetration testing. Why doing nothing is no longer an option, and how to get people comfortable with going to the cyber dentist. Thank you, everybody, for joining me on another episode of the Protect It All podcast. This is take 2 of this episode. We had some technical difficulties, which tends to happen from time to time, which is no problem at all. But I'm very excited to have my friend Oren on again the podcast. And then Ray, this is your first time. Well, I guess you were on it last time, but it didn't get to the end. So we're starting over. So this is technically your first time on the podcast. So Oren, for those of the audience that doesn't know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are, how you got in the industry, what you're doing nowadays, like all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. And since I was on your show last time, now I'm a principal OT security engineer. So my kids are very scared of me. They think I'm a principal. I was thinking about making a sign that said Oren Principal's Office, but I haven't yet. But anyway, so I am a principal OT security engineer with GuidePoint Security. I've been in OT for over 20 years, which if you heard me speak ever, I like to say, whenever you hear that, you should be a little bit skeptical because OT hasn't really been around 20 years. So, but I was in O before OT. So I was crawling around in the bilges of drilling rigs and Navy ships and just being an electrician and electronics technician, and then proceeding on to IT and consulting and eventually OT cybersecurity. And once I hit that, I was just like, oh yeah, this is where I need to be. And all the spy versus spy and all the stuff, I got caught up in it all. And here I am. I don't think I'll ever leave. So that's my background.
Awesome. Ray, you're up, buddy.
Right. So everyone, yes, my name is Reynaldo Gonzalez. I either go by Ray or Reynaldo. Depends on how you want to pronounce it. But, I guess really for me, the way it started for my career, my journey was I actually come from the IT side. I like a lot of people, I started with the interest in computers when you're young, building computers, messing them up, trying to fix it. I remember having my first Activa model computer where we browsed, the AOL and got infections for malware, trying to fix that. But what really got me into it is being able to just kind of explore that kind of technology. And then I was doing kind of like networking courses without building cables, Ethernet cables when I was in high school, like sophomore. And then from there, we had an opportunity to learn networking. So we took like the Cisco CCNA classes to learn about the routing and switching. And then from that moment, I knew, okay, I want to do technology, I want to do network. So I went off to college, got my degree in the networking side, graduated, I got my first job at Cisco Systems. And I was there for about 13 years, doing a lot of I did like the network engineering side, did consulting. I was the advanced services team then, but I got to really support a lot of customers in the US, South America, Central America, and the exposure of being able to see different types of networks and environments was an interesting part to seeing how these things, what I learned about in theory in class was one thing, but then when you actually apply it to what you see in real customer networks was like, so that's how it makes sense. Being able to see that perspective. But the bridge for me in security happened more as throughout my years at Cisco, I got more into security related projects like network security, doing more infrastructure, architecture. And at that time, I was living in Spain and I had my backpack stolen after I had come back from work, left my stuff. I had my backpack with me with other personal items that I don't know why I had it with, to be honest, but I was at a restaurant and in there I had some USB drive, some, kind of like checkbook type money that was worth like money in a way. And within 2 minutes, it got stolen without me understanding, without me realizing what had happened. And when I found out about it, I guess, minutes later is, I I went home, called my bank, and it was like an hour time frame that went through. And my credit card had said that there was already like $3,000 charged to the account. So it was like really fast. Fast forward a little bit. I later went back to the restaurant and find out that the couple that had taken my backpack were like very elegantly dressed, like suit, black dress. And you could never tell just watching these people that they would be the kind of person to do that. So it was like that kind of identity is what I realized that caught me more to pay more attention to security. So then from there, I really started getting more into cybersecurity, getting myself more involved, went back to my master's in that, left Cisco, went for United Airlines, got my role there as a principal cybersecurity architect, supporting the IT side and OT. And then from United, came over to Cummins, doing the same thing. So right now I do a lot of like the IT side, but also the OT side of infrastructure, critical infrastructure, supporting strategy, architecture, that kind of thing. So that's my background.
And Reynaldo is a big deal in Houston. So if you're in Houston, he's everywhere.
Not really. Not as much as Oren's mom.
I'm trying.
Well, that's the funny thing. And I get the opportunity to sit across from awesome folks like you guys. And, everybody has a journey that gets them there, and our experiences bring value, right? It's why true diversity on your team is people with different experiences, because those experiences can help me see things that I've never been exposed to. So I don't think about the things that Oren has when he was crawling around in the bottom, in the basement of a ship or whatever it is, right? Those are things that he's going to bring into the operational side. When we're looking at cybersecurity, he has that perspective that others don't. And that's why one of the things for me, that's why I see OT is difficult. It's not hard. The technology side, as Oren is doing with his demonstrations and his labs that he's building out now, right? He's showing people like it's not hard. It's really not that difficult. That's not the point. It's understanding the why. Why do we do things differently? Why is the impact different? Like, why do we secure things differently? Why do we have open protocols? Like, why do we not, why do we not lock our control room workstations? Like, why do we leave it wide open with no passwords? Like, these are things that from a security perspective, if you only looked at the security side of things, you're like, oh my gosh, your front door's wide open. You're like, yeah, but it's in a protected environment and there's 3 other doors that are blocking it and there's a security guard and I have all these other mitigating controls. I'm not really worried about that. It's more important that the operator can actually control the thing that's going on than it is, oh gosh, what's my password? Or Bob went to the restroom. Who can log in to turn this thing on or off or adjust something? Like, that's a bad situation to be in. So
that's true. And I was reading actually about Bell Labs. I don't know if you heard of Bell Labs, but they invented almost everything you see in a computer. It's amazing the amount of innovation. And the guy was saying, I forget the book, Innovators. But the guy was saying like Bell Labs, it wasn't one smart person like Elon Musk, that just comes in there. I know he has a team, but you know what I mean? It wasn't one person that drove it. It was, you had a PhD in physics on one side that maybe didn't know how to use a screwdriver. And then you had somebody that spent 30 years climbing telephone poles and running telephone wire. And then you had a guy, electrical engineer and all these different varied people. And they all came together and worked together in the same spot. And it just accelerated, which I think OT needs that. Yeah. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing and just bringing as many different people together as possible is what we need to light a fire and get this thing burning.
100%. 100%.
Like something also related to that, like the other day when I met someone in one of these events I go to here in Houston and they were asking me like, so why OT? Like, you have a networking background, architecture, IT. So how did you get into OT? Why do you like OT? Why do you want to be in it? And I had to really think about it because there's, aside from just liking cyber, just the way it's so dynamic, it's evolving and it's always changing, like just the way it is. It's almost like in a way, think about, for example, like my wife, my sisters, they're like into gossip kind of stuff. So it's like kind of like gossip. Cybersecurity is always something happening. You want to know what's going on. So you want to pay attention and get the scoop, get the details, and being able to be part of that is just, that's one aspect to it. But like the other part that made me realize that like OT, why OT and why do I enjoy doing it? When I was at United and just thinking about the way the infrastructure is and how OT is very sensitive, a lot of old, legacy and things that you can't always, fix it the same way like IT, but it's critical infrastructure. And being able to, my perspective is, if at that time when I was in aviation, my family's flying on planes, I even fly on planes, friends and other people are flying on planes. Like that safety is so critical that we got to do what's necessary to protect them. Now, of course, now there's a lot that goes into it. In aviation, there's very regulated, a lot of security, but like just in general, thinking like about the chemical, the utilities, energy, everything. If this gets breached and they attack in a way that cause an impact, that's talking about people's lives and safety. So for me, that's kind of like a driver. Like, you know what? I may not be in these other industries, but I mean, aviation, manufacturing, we got to do our part to really protect it. And everything that we do a little bit here and there with our peers all makes a big difference to try to help modernize where OT security can get better.
Yeah, 100%. And I always give the analogy. I'm sure people, if you've listened to my podcast, you probably heard me say it at least once, but it's the control system in the airplane has a vulnerability and you're flying 30,000 feet in the air. Do you want to update that while you're flying? I don't. I say we land first.
Yeah.
It's probably fine. I don't want to risk it. Like that's the thing in OT. It's just different. Again, Oren, coming from the military, you talk about ships and warships and a submarine or something like that. Like you've got to be really confident. And obviously a lot of those things, they have, secondary and tertiary systems that they back up and all that kind of stuff. But still, do you want to be the reason this thing goes down because you pushed a patch that is it really critical? Like we're a mile underneath the ocean. Do we need to update that right now? Or why don't we wait till we get to port before we do it and make sure that it's in a safe environment? It's why we do a lot of things in OT and outages. Like if I'm going to make big, massive changes or I want to do a pen test or something like that, I'm probably going to wait till an outage or at least when it's a non-critical time that if worst case scenario happens, and you talked about this last time, right? You walk in the room and, some PLC trips and they're like, hey, you just tripped the PLC. And then when you got to the actual information, you said the guy was like, oh yeah, no big deal. It happens every day around this time anyways. You're like, okay, well, couldn't you have led with that instead of telling me that it was my fault?
That's my favorite story.
Why don't you tell the broader story? Because you told it last time, but we got cut off. So I'll put it as a short, but it's still a really good comment to really understand.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, it's my favorite story. So yeah, we were, you've heard active scanning, right? Is active scanning safe? Is it not safe? 1 week it's safe. The next week it's not safe. And we were doing some active scanning on a client and we went through, and I am very careful because I've been the guy on the plant floor, like you're saying. I've been the person on the Navy ship. I've been the person on a drilling rig, drilling into Mother Nature's energy source, which is not something to play with. And so we're doing some active scanning, and I had explained to them, like, we're going to use the safe protocols and we're going to limit the network throughput and all the things you would say. And halfway through, you said, hey, you just tripped off my PLC. You need to stop. And I was so embarrassed. And I stopped my scanning and I'm apologizing. I'm like stressing out about it because it's a major deal, because I was trying to be so careful. And then the guy was like, oh yeah, it happens every day around this time. I wouldn't worry about it. And it got me thinking, like, when you're active scanning in your environment, you are responsible for every bad thing that happens for the next 2 weeks. Like even if you stopped and you're gone, they're like, oh yeah, they scanned and now my system is tripped off for the 5th time this month. Like it must be their fault.
The last thing that's changed, right? They're looking at, from the I think I told the story last time, but the pre-job brief, even if they're just talking about, hey, Oren's going to be doing active scanning today. If something happens, even if you haven't started yet, if something happens, the first thing in that engineer's mind is going to be like, pre-job brief, Oren's going to be scanning. That's probably it. He broke something. Let me go find Oren and beat him until he fixes whatever he's doing or stops breaking things. Even though you haven't, like you're still in the break room, drinking your coffee. You hadn't even started yet, but it's still your fault until you prove it's not.
That's true. And that's with everything I've ever done in my career. Even adding a firewall rule or installing endpoint protection. If something happens, like your thing ruined it's very funny. But I'll tell you this is a secret. Don't tell it. No, I'm just kidding. I think what separates a master craftsman from somebody starting out and somebody maybe starting it out in cyber is the way you reframe it. So like if I were to tell you, well, I'm going to sell you this software. It's secure. We know as cybersecurity, nothing's secure. Okay. There's just different levels of security, right? And you tell me what you do to make it secure and what I need to do to make it secure and what to do if something happens, right? And that's how you have that conversation. And in safety, when you go to the plant, it's the same way. So instead of saying, I'm going to active scan your network, it's safe. What you should say is, there is risk anytime you do anything in the network, but we're going to do this and this and this to limit that risk. If you see anything, you could do this to limit the risk and let me know. And as soon as you see, you know what I mean? So you have a conversation about, this is what could happen. This is what I'm going to do to lower the risk as much as possible. This is what you could do. And if it happens, this is how you could lower the impact. And just like any other CISSP risk conversation. And when you tell to them like that, then they're prepared for it. They're like, okay, I'm invested. I think that's a good idea to go ahead. Then when something happens, they don't always jump your butt and say like, it's your fault, because they were part of the conversation. They're bought in. And I don't know, I just have a much easier time about it. But you don't see that a lot. Like when you see the marketing material from vendors, they say it's like safe scanning. And I think that's not a good message to say. I think it's more nuanced, and you get a better result when you're just honest about it. Like, so that's my soapbox.
But Aaron, that's a very valid point though. Sorry, Aaron, Oren. It's a very valid point because if you think about also from the time that you've been doing it, I mean, many years ago, scanning, that concept of the scanning of what it is, what it means, and how it's relayed from like framing to the way it is now. And, it before used to be where, let's say, a couple of years ago, it was, this is, safe, scanning, OT. But now the language is changing to say, well, we're pro, it's a query, it's a pro. We're not doing scanning, but it's how we're using OT to talk to OT. Vendors are catching up. They're realizing that too, because it's true that the message, how they present it, and to say, oh, this is a safe scan, like you said, not 100%. Like, can you guarantee 100% that is really safe? You can imply, yes, but it's really the matter of how it's implemented, what is being done, what exactly is involved in part of that scanning. And they're catching up to this. So the framing is getting better. How it's being described as a capability across these different solutions is making a big difference, from that perspective, but also the education, like you and me can give along with our peers when we talk to the business, is help them understand it's not that kind of IT scan. It's not like we're doing an Nmap in that way. We're doing it, using the Modbus, or we're using whatever protocol to talk to this environment that they already speak the same language. We're just communicating to say, hey, tell me about yourself. What are you doing? What do you have? So it's getting better. And just the more we do it, then it's just going to get there more. And it's, of course, going to also have an impact with whenever you say AI is doing it. Now, AI part is a whole another animal. So
I had to say it.
Yeah,
that's something.
It's like that AI word, or the scan word, has just been, especially in OT, it's like a bad word. Don't say that word. Don't put it in your marketing. Don't say you're doing it. Like, in fact, you want to say, we're not scanning. We're going to probe. We're going to interrogate, like any other word that means the same damn thing, but you can't say scan.
That's true.
Yes. Yeah.
And so to go to our OTSecCon talk, which I thought it was super fun. So we did kind of like a boxing match, and I was the consultant pen tester, and Reynaldo was the asset owner. And so in this instance, I may be banging around in his network scanning or probing, or however you want to say it. But he is the one that's going to get the call. He's the one that's accountable for my actions. And so I thought that was a really good conversation, of what I do and what he does, and how our perspectives differ, and how I get excited when I find vulnerabilities, and he's like, oh crap. So it's just a good, maybe he gets excited too. I don't know, but
so walk me through that. Like, what did that look like? And what did that, how is that messaging helping? Because we always do. And I say this a lot as well. We do business at the speed of trust. So the faster that the Oren of the world that's going in to do their thing can make Reynaldo actually trust him, the more likely he's going to allow you to do the thing you're going to do. And it's not because Reynaldo thinks there's zero possibility that something bad can happen, but he has a pretty good confidence that if something bad happens, I'm aware of it. Oren is not going off rogue, doing things we didn't talk about. He's doing things within this box. That doesn't mean the risk is zero, but I know what the risk is in this box, and I know how to respond to that thing. Whereas I've seen other folks that say they convince you, like, look over here, and then they're trying to not let you know that they're doing other stuff. And yeah, you may get some data, but you're also losing that trust. And man, that's not a place you want to be in, especially in OT, because you do it once and you're out the door. You're never allowed on site and anybody else's site for that matter again.
Yeah, you're right. When it comes down to it, I think it's a few different things. When we had that conversation, we were talking about, trust is a very big part. Like, it's got to be very clear, the expectations. What are the rules that they got to follow? Being transparent. Us on the asset owner side, we also have to be clear about what we want. How much, what kind of perspective of that pen test we want to do. If it's something, external, internal, assume, breach, there's a lot of different factors that go into it, but it's not just, say, if I'm the one engaged with Oren, it's not just my input or my requirements that I'm considering. I have to have those internal conversations to get that alignment and say, well, like, hey, before I even share with Oren all the details, here's the things that we want to address. Maybe it's driven by just cybersecurity initiative. It could be an audit related. It could be something, tying back to clients, or it could be something that we get pulled in separately. But there's different stakeholders that you got to consider, and getting the right alignment expectation that we want to do these things to see these kinds of outcomes or these kinds of information we want to address. Then it's sharing that cohesive message to someone like Oren, or whoever's going to be doing that pen test, so that we can have that transparency. So we can have that information of what we want out of the results, during the results, and then what comes after, and getting that action done.
And that goes into, like, I think a lot of what we talked about in the talk was just how to be creative about it, right? So people say, don't ever pen test a live plant, which I actually agree with. You don't want to pen test, your plane as you're flying. But what you can do is maybe set a hypothesis. Like, I want to know if there's any protocols that can lead to compromise, right? These Windows protocols like NetBIOS or local link name resolution. There's some protocols that Windows will just hand over their hash, like if you use a protocol right. And so you could get a passive network traffic and see if those protocols exist. And if they exist on the network, then you could say, well, since they exist on the network, I know I could probably spoof them and get your hash. So you don't even need to really be on the network. What you need is somebody with evil mind, somebody that thinks red, that can look at it and run a hypothesis and find weaknesses. And you don't necessarily have to own every box. You can gather the information you need to validate whether that weakness exists. And there's your top 20 weaknesses. And if you got those covered, you're in better shape, pretty good shape. But when I actually go on pen tests, usually the top 20 are not covered. Like, there's something in there. And these are places that have spent millions and millions of dollars on cybersecurity. And they're really talented OT cybersecurity professionals. But we all have blind spots. And so having somebody that has a different perspective outside of yours that can help you identify where your weak spots are that you don't see can really bring a lot of value and make sure you're not wasting a lot of money on something that maybe you're not ready for. Super advanced vulnerability management system, when maybe you have a very easily guessable domain admin password. That's the one I used and I had this GIF of this. It was a teenager learning how to drive, and they look in their blind spot, and there's actually somebody there, and they're like, "What?
What are you doing there? Why are you there?" Right? Yeah. It's the analogy I've used as well, as like, you don't put a paint job on a car that doesn't have a motor in it. Like, more than likely, if you go buy a junker car, the first step is not to put a paint job on it. Let's probably get it running first. And then we can sit. Now, obviously, if you're building a custom car, that analogy doesn't exactly work. But, you get the point of what I'm trying to make there, is like, prioritize what you're doing, and don't just go buy the latest AI thing if you don't have basic segmentation in your network. Like the talk I gave at DEF CON in Singapore was really just the basics. Like, do you have an asset inventory? Like the SANS 5 critical controls, right? Just basic. Do I have secure remote access? Do I have an asset inventory? Am I segmenting my network away from OT and IT? Am I segmenting systems off? Like just the basic level things that don't have to be expensive. And I don't have to do a pen test to do those things. I can probably determine what's going on in my environment and make big changes by doing some of those really, really basic items.
And the only thing I would add to that is what I recommend is I've seen people, we all have what we like to do, right? So some people are asset inventory people and they're like, I'm doing the basics, and they spend their whole time getting asset inventory and they're looking for that last host on that subnet way down in Costa Rica, right? And other people are vulnerability management people, like, oh, let's do the basics. So what I find interesting is that like it's 80% of the value you get from 20% of your effort, right? So just getting the first 80% is a huge step. Then go on to, like you're saying, get 80% of your asset inventory, then get 80% on network segmentation. And the pen test will help you say, hey, you're actually, 10% on network segmentation. You thought you were 80, but you're actually, so
right.
I'm seeing a lot of, actually, we're seeing growing demand for that. Like people are wanting their systems tested, and like it used to be like risk quantification and all this kind of stuff. Now we're seeing a lot of like, don't tell me, show me. Like I think that's really exciting because that's what I like to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Something else too, like to think about what you guys said with segmentation piece and visibility. The way I also look at it when it's a pen test is also like validation too, and being able to architecturally visualize, but proactively also plan with what's your target state locally. One of the things that when it comes, whether it's pen tests or just in general, seeing, hey, where are we you got to have also, the asset owner side, we got to have a good level of understanding of your current state. And it's not just some areas in technology, like, oh yeah, we know we have firewall, we do segmentation, but look at the bigger picture. Is what else do we have in place that supports all these different areas that would be areas of consideration from a pen test report? Because, different findings can mean that you got to improve your visibility, that you got to improve your controls for remote access, or how granular you get with segmentation, if it's east-west, north-south, zones, DMZs, and even just access to devices or hardening of systems. And it really also takes, it's a very collaborative effort from what I see, is that you got to know really well the environment that you're trying to assess, but also have an idea proactively that says, this is where we want to get to. Today we're here. We know, or we expect we're doing these things. To some degree, it might be, good, not as great, or just completely lacking. And we want to know, what does this output show us that can tell us, oh yes, we're doing this right. Or like you say, you think you're doing 80%, but you're doing 10% segmentation. Then that's a point that would help you. So really knowing the architecture environment is a critical piece to see, did it make sense, or was there value in doing that pen test report? And a lot of times it can happen as long as those details are there. And that acknowledgement between the asset owner and the pen tester and what you're expecting, what you share, is very clear from up front.
Yeah. And the other piece to that the trust thing that we talked about, right? So when I'm doing these assessments or red teams or whatever you want to call them, like we're walking in and I'm sitting down with folks they're doing a good job. Like they're doing the best they can. It's not like I try very hard to communicate like, look, I'm not here to tell you that you suck at your job or that your baby's ugly. Right. But what I am here to tell you is to your point, Oren, I may see things that you don't. That doesn't mean that you're bad at what you do. None of the things that I find are to be like, aha, I'm smarter than you. Like, no, that's not the point. The point is that we may find things that you didn't know, or that it's that trust but verify. Like you thought you were at 80%. We're going to show you these other things. It's not hey, you're bad, Oren. It's really just to say, hey, here's some things. Now let's go fix them together. And if those folks have that mindset and they're open to that, then it's amazing how much you can get done. But when they're defensive and they're like, hey, well, the any rule in the firewall is at the bottom, so it's not really a problem. Like, yeah, it actually is a problem. You shouldn't have any rule in your firewall ever, anywhere in your firewall. And there should be rules there's just obvious things that you shouldn't have to justify. But when somebody's trying to defend it, it's like, I understand why it's there. I've put in any rules myself. Couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. The plant needed to be running. That's a way to make sure it runs. We put it in and it ran for a couple of weeks. But in the background, I'm like, I know that doesn't need to stay there. And we need to remove it because that's not a good thing to have, because I basically just turned this firewall into a router.
Yes. The good old any rule.
That's right.
That's true. And
more than what they would like to count. Also to go with that, like there's even considerations with, the any rule, is very commonly like you see like with those routers, right? The firewalls. But in something similar can also happen at the lower levels. If you're using those kind of ACLs and filters down to your switches or even routers in some cases, where they're kind of acting like firewall kind of role. But those from time to time can get very long and messy, if you're always having to manage that or update them or like make an exception. Okay, we're going to make an exception to put it this time. And then these one-offs become consistently one-offs that happen. And when it comes down to that level of rules segmentation, you got to get to a point where you have to reassess or start looking at capabilities that will be able to then take the way you've managed the network, those rules, that can now do it in a more logical way without having to have all that administrative burden. So for that, you got to have the right level of reaching out to see what solutions out there can do this. But just because one said we can do it, you got to validate. You got to check to make sure that it can actually do what it does. So there's a lot of effort that goes.
And then you get promoted and this poor guy comes up and takes ownership of all this stuff, all these exceptions. I think that's a problem I see in IT a lot. OT, nobody gets promoted. People get promoted, but you're at the plant. Everybody knows the plant so well. Like, that's my favorite thing about, like, when I find somebody at the plant and they like hear a noise and they're like, oh, that's a number 2 fire pump. I'm like, right. For real? You know, that's a number 2 fire pump by just that sound? They're like, oh yeah, that's a number 2 fire pump. Or like, yeah, what was I saying? Yeah. So those kind of people you find in OT, but in IT, generally people are moving all around and people leave the the CISO is in place, I think, an average of 2 years, maybe. So just as soon as he's getting, a segmentation project takes years in OT usually. So just as soon as that thing is rolling out, he's quitting. The next guy comes in and says, what is all this? Whoosh, yank it all.
Yep. So that's not my vendor. I don't like it that way. Let's do it a different way. Let's adjust. It can be very frustrating. Well, and then the other conversation that, again, I was a vendor from a product vendor side. I've got vendor X and vendor Y. The CISO comes in or the new guy comes in. I like vendor Y better, whether it's a firewall or a whatever the product is. And it's just like, okay, maybe it's better. Maybe it's got new capabilities, whatever, but we haven't even finished implementing the one we have. Before we start jumping ship and changing to something that's got better features, let's get the features out of the one that we already have. We haven't even deployed it all the way. We're not even
that's crazy.
Monitoring it. Like there's all these things that we're not even doing. And you're already looking at the next version of the competitors. Like, I get it that they took you to dinner, but let's just stick with what we got until it's time to, go down the road a little bit further than where we're at.
I do like those dinners.
Actually, on that part, the tools rationalization piece is actually, it's an ongoing challenge with all the companies deal with. Like, or I'm sure you hear it too, or you've seen it, but like, when, like at these events, I talk to a lot of the different peers and leaders, and it's like, hey, how many tools do you have? Oh, we have way too many, 40, 50, 60, 30 something. And then you ask, well, how many are doing this particular area? And you could probably get like at least 2 or 3 called out that are doing those kinds of things, and so it's something that, that part of rationalization and architecture, I saying, let's look at what we have first. Like, I'm always in favor of, okay, if you go into a role or you get brought into a company, you already have all this tech stack, and depending on what your role is for that team, it might be that you have to look into it, but in our side with architecture, that's something that we want to understand. We should understand. We got to know what are we effectively using that are configured and doing for our roadmap and cybersecurity, but that aligns one to the vision, the goals that you're trying to achieve. But when we have these tools, go back and reassess, okay, who are the consumers of that tool? What are they using it for? What kind of capabilities? What features do we have turned on that are actually being leveraged? And then start comparing that with other tools or your tech stack. And then you start to see where there's overlap, where there's gaps. And that starts making more sense in how you rationalize what you have in-house. Or is there an opportunity to fill a gap that these tools can't do, either a limitation or it costs extra money that you have to go and invest? That becomes a different conversation. But it's being that proactive to go do that. And it takes the right level of mindset to push that.
Well, and as you look at the bigger picture and a mature program like that's what you're talking about, right? And some of these larger programs that we have, I'm going to have the Venn diagram of capabilities, and there's going to be overlaps. There's also going to be gaps. And those are the things that we're looking for. If I have an overlap, sometimes having two different sources of truth is good in that, this thing is telling me A and this thing is telling me B. They should be telling me the same thing. Why am I getting different signals? Or, hey, they're both telling me the same thing. They both say it's 73 degrees in my room. Cool. I've got my thermostat that says it's 73 degrees and I've got a thermometer on my desk and they're both saying the same thing. That's awesome. If the thermometer on my desk says 80, but the thermostat says 70, there's a problem, right? Because it actually is 80 and the thermostat says it's not, right? So sometimes those overlapping things are good. On the flip side, from a cost perspective, many times these things, do I need both tools? Like, what is there enough overlap that I can reduce my tech stack and have fewer tools to do the 80-20 rule that Oren was talking about? So there's all sorts of ways that you can look at it. And as AI comes out, I see more and more folks talking about how can I build an off the shelf custom thing that we support internally instead of going and buying the expensive things that are out there. And I do that obviously home in my lab and the things that I'm doing, but doing that in an enterprise level, especially an OT level, is a different thing. So those are other things that I'm concerned on as we're talking about this. If I were to approach Reynaldo and say, hey, I can build you a thing that does what you're looking for exactly, right? And we can have one product, you build it, we'll build it together, and it'll fill all of your gaps. And that sounds great. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but there's a whole bunch of risk behind that and beyond just the cyber thing. But who's going to support it when Aaron leaves? Who's going to support it? Like, how do we know that it's going to work? And how are we going to, stress test it and all these different types of things? That the reason you're buying these commercially off the shelf products is they've done a lot of those things. There's support around it. They've had the code and it's been tested and been gone through all these different SOC 2 analysis and, and they've smoke tested it and all that kind of stuff that I think a lot of people aren't thinking about. Just because I can vibe code something and it works, then it's good enough to put in my production environment and depend on it. I don't want it flying the plane for me. Not yet, at least.
Yeah. Going back to what we were saying before, like active scanning was bad enough. If I vibe code something and I put it in there and lightning strikes outside the plant and kills all the PLCs, they're going to blame my code for sure.
Yep.
Like anything that happens in that plant is my fault. Like I've vibe coded this thing. Yeah. Anything that happens in there is going to be my fault. Period. Forever.
Oren's Terminator just killed us all.
That's right.
The other thing too, like a lot of things we got to look at too is how they complement each other too. There might be, there will be overlap in a lot of different capabilities and tools. Like a lot of tools do many of the same things, but sometimes the same thing can mean the way it analyzes data, the way it captures it, the way it presents it, that is targeting a specific view or interest to say some customers, some groups. But then the overlap they have with another tool is presented in a different way. And something like you're saying, like that overlap is not necessarily bad, but it's true. There's some overlap that you might need, but there's also overlap that is, well, categorically as a section, they might be in the same group, but they're actually doing different things. They appear at the surface to be the same, but they complement each other and what one does and the other one offers, or how they enrich each other. That's also key to look at these things from rationalizing what you have. and being able to make those decisions, where's there opportunity? Where is there a way for us to fill gaps? Where can we expand and grow? It just kind of depends on the use cases and how folks are using it. You got to make them very effective and use them the right way for it to have the right value.
And I go back to our pen test conversation, which I think people are coming around to, is that my next step should be the one that somebody used to gain access to my system, right? So then you could say, I thought I had coverage here, but they got around my detection system, or then that's where those complements can come in. And maybe I want to add Windows Defender to, since I could run Windows Defender along another endpoint protection, I could have both of them running, or have two sources for my network detection. But I think you have a strong business case if somebody used it to attack your system, and you could kind of steer your investments like that, instead of like trying to do it off of, maturity diagrams or something. Like that's what we were talking about in our talk, is like the value you get out of it and the risks. Spend a lot of time on the risks, but
there's a lot of risk there, right?
Yes. There's also risk not doing anything. Right.
That's true.
Benefit. Yeah, exactly.
So
and that's the catch-22, right? To your point there, Ray, is the risk of doing something means I'm bringing in these things. I'm changing my process. People don't like change. I'm allowing somebody scary like Oren to come in and scan my network. But on the flip side, not allowing Oren to come in and scan your network or penetrate or whatever, interrogate, talk nicely to, whatever you want to call it, means that you don't know. Like putting your head in the sand and hoping that you're good isn't enough anymore, right? We see, 10 years ago when I was doing this, to Oren's point, like I've been doing this longer than it's been called OT. When I first got into this, it was just the O, right? It was just, hey, you're in this power plant company and technology, and you also know the operation side. We're going to put you focus on these things. It wasn't called OT. There was no industrial or OT products in the world, right? So when you're looking at these things, we have to think about, like, what is the big picture of this? Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we here? And I can't just pretend that it's not going to happen. Like, we see these things in the news. We're seeing attacks hit critical infrastructure. We're seeing attacks hit manufacturing. We're seeing ransomware. We're seeing Colonial Pipeline type events. These things are regular events. No matter what some of the pundits will say, that there's never been an OT attack. There's OT attacks all the time. Just because they're not reported doesn't mean they didn't happen. I've personally been at more than a handful of things that are not necessarily public, and I'm not going to obviously mention for those reasons, but they were absolutely OT attacks, and they brought down very, very large critical infrastructure environments. And there, it happens. So doing nothing is no longer an option.
And to go also with that, it's also like the fear of knowing you have to then take action. That's also kind of, related. Okay, not doing anything has a risk. But then you'll have, there may be some people, like I spoke to a few folks in these events who were like, well, hey, what happens? Like, do you want to, if you do a pen test, you get these results. Now, there's something has to be done. And some responses I've gotten from some people is like, well, I don't want to, because if I know, I now have to do something about it. And it's like, yeah, but I get it, because then now you're kind of forced, but it's like, just because you don't know about it doesn't mean that you're not safe from it or that it's not going to happen. Like, you need to know. It could be that you're not ready to do it, or you don't have the technology, but at least you're aware of it, and then you have a plan or have some kind of action, and at the same time, it doesn't mean you're accountable for all those steps. It might be that you drive part of it. Other groups will be accountable. Maybe they're not ready, but at least they're aware and they can prioritize. But being fearful of knowing, being, I guess, oblivious to it, does not make you any safer than just trying to be proactive. And that's a mindset.
And to me, that's the same as if you've been in OT, the safety culture. Right. So, there's a reason why we do pre-job briefs. We have safety briefings. Like, we have challenge coins, stop when unsure. Like, we're challenging, and a junior person can walk up to the most senior person and say, hey, this isn't safe. Stop. right? That culture, and there's no retribution from it. Like if I'm doing something unsafe, it's not that I'm getting reprimanded. It's actually that I want you to be safe and go home, and I don't want you to get injured. It's okay that I'm getting reprimanded, quote unquote, told not to do something because it's not safe. I don't want you to stand in the chair to change the light bulb. I want you to go get a ladder and somebody that's authorized to stand on a ladder and change it out correctly. Yes, I know it's a pain in the butt, but you can also fall out of the chair. Like the little things like that are a big deal. So when we bring that culture in OT and we start including that same culture around the cybersecurity thing, it shouldn't be that I don't want to know. It should be that I do want to know. Doesn't mean that I can do anything about it. But even if I can't make a change, even if I can't buy a product, I'd rather know it's there so I can raise my hand and say, hey, by the way, we have this risk. I don't know. It's improbable that it's ever going to get impacted because of X, Y, and Z, or maybe I just don't have the money to fix it. But it should at least be documented so that we know that it's there. So if something does happen, then at least everybody knows, by the way, this thing is really flammable. Let's keep fire away from it. So that if it does catch on fire, I should have a plan. Okay, if that thing catches on fire, the fire extinguisher is over here and here's our process. I'd at least like to have a plan of what happens if that thing happens, the bad thing happens, instead of just pretending I don't know that it's there. Because you probably know it's there anyways, and you just don't want it documented that it's there, which to me is just a level of ignorance that is beyond acceptable.
Yeah.
So I got a question. I think it's almost an emotional thing. I know some friends of mine, obviously not me, of course, because I'm perfect. I know people that don't go to the dentist because they don't want to know, right? That's a classic thing. Of course, it'd be better if they knew either way, but it's an emotional thing and it's not something they know it's not good. So how do you make people more comfortable going to the cyber dentist?
Again, to me, it's a culture thing. It's just the same thing that we've done in the safety. And I think it's that same culture. If people think that they're going to be reprimanded because something bad happened, because there was a malware or there was an attack or there was a vulnerability or the PLC went down, then they're not going to tell you. They're going to try to cover it up, or they're going to pretend they don't know and they don't want to fix it. If they feel like that their environment is accepting that I can raise my hand and say, hey, there's a vulnerability or a risk over there, and people aren't going to scream at me, and I'm not going to get a whole bunch of chatter about it, and we can document something. Again, it doesn't mean we have to change it, but that culture has to be one of acceptance, not reprimand. And we've done a great job at OT with that. Again, I keep going back to the safety culture. 0 is the acceptable safety risk, right? We want 0 incidents, like safety 0. That's what we talk about. I don't want somebody dying. There's no level of death acceptable in my power plant, right? It sounds stupid to say out loud, but there was a time when that wasn't communicated, and that wasn't the actual official standing from not that they really officially accepted it but by not unaccepting it, however you want to say that, they are by definition accepting it. So if we built that same mindset, and that comes at the organizational level, and it comes from the top down and the bottom up, they have to understand that if I raise my hand and say, hey, this is not safe, we have a any rule, or I'm using a Netgear firewall or router or switch in this space, and that's not okay. You should be able to raise your hand as a junior person and say, that's a vulnerability. We really shouldn't be able to do that. That doesn't mean I have to rip it out and break the system. It just means it needs to be documented so that it can get put into the pipeline of how do we fix that long term so that risk gets removed.
There's also like one at a couple things that too. There's a few different factors that also make sense to me. I agree with you, wholeheartedly, and it's, culture is a big part of it. And I think to go with that the culture, it also comes through the leadership style and how they allow or empower their employees to speak up and, hey guys, we're all after the same thing. If this gets impacted on a part of a area of that site, it affects everybody, because at the end of the day, we all work for the same company, right? And so it's, it also comes down to that leadership having the right message, the right comfortableness that you have in that team, where you build that trust with your employees or the group, but also among each other. being able to maybe have like some kind of outing event where, you get folks to mingle and have more, team connection professionally, that they feel comfortable with each other, because it's also a personality. It's also individual personality, where some people are just more shy than others. Some are more outgoing. Some of them are very candid in what they say, and others are just very quiet. And being able to work around the different personality types, but empowering them to say, hey, I get this, but help them to help each other and help themselves, so that they can speak up and share these things. And if you have a concern, raise up your hand, like you're saying, hey, this might be an issue. Even if you're right or wrong, it's okay. But also send this invitation, especially with the senior guys, that, hey, if a junior person says something that's saying wrong, don't be condescending to them, help them, support them, let them grow, teach them. And we need to be able to offset that kind of support, or I guess, or that kind of knowledge transfer at the same time. So it goes back to the style of the team, the mechanics, the chemistry of the team, of the individuals. But being able, I think a big part with your culture is that empowerment. They got to feel like they are valued, and they are valued, and to be able to be empowered to help bring those things to the attention of the right folks.
Maybe even expected to, right? Like, I expect to know where my risks are. So you need to tell me. Like, don't keep it a secret. That's what they said in the Navy. Don't keep a secret. So.
Yeah. I mean, going back to that, right? It's in the safety culture. Again, I think about power plants when we're doing outages, the whole goal that we're communicating the whole time, maybe a 3-month long outage. And the whole point is safety zero, safety zero, safety. That's the first and only goal. And the safety team would actually have a budget. And at the end of the outage, if we had a safe outage, then there would be like a giant party, and they would have like a fish fry, and they'd bring in barbecue, and they would feed the entire outage staff. So it's like whoever did the most, safety briefs. Like if I saw Oren doing something unsafe and I wrote him up about it, Oren and I were talked about in a positive way. And because I submitted that thing, then I got added to a list, and maybe I won, a gift card or a day off or an hour, whatever that thing is.
Shotgun.
But to your point, it's all about that. Yeah, shotgun. There you go. It's all about that culture and enticing people to say, hey, not only is it okay, it's actually demanded. Like, we demand that we do this. Like, no incidents. Like, it's like your phishing attacks, when you're doing the fish me, or you have the campaigns, like, instead of getting on to somebody if they click the link, because the links are really good now, so it's very easy to happen. Instead of that, let's entice them to be looking for it. And whoever, reports the most phishing things, gets the Apple, new device or a gift card or whatever. Now, obviously there's some things you got to go into that. And I'm not telling you how to do a program, because people could take advantage of that and send blah, 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 whatever. But you get my point. Like, it's all about the earnesty of doing this with the right reason, right? And the communicating and making it fun and making it be something that is not looked down upon.
They finally got me, Aaron. I finally clicked one.
It happens, man.
They finally got me after all these.
But why did you feel embarrassed? Right. So that's the mindset that we got to understand.
I should know better. But, nobody jumped on me about it. I don't even think anybody knew about it, but it was definitely like, ooh, that's a good one. But
yeah. And it happens. It's going to happen to everyone. Everyone's going to click one. Like, I literally reported one this morning, but they with AI and everything else, they're going to get better. We expect to do things unsafely. We expect to get injured. We expect, incidents to happen. It should be the same around cybersecurity. And we should have a culture of, okay, what could we learn from this? How can we make sure that we don't do this again? Instead of saying, Oren, how are you so stupid that you clicked on this link?
You work in cyber.
It should be, okay, well, if Oren could click on this link, imagine how many other people probably clicked on that link that aren't in cyber. How can we make sure that everybody learns from this so that it doesn't happen again? Right? That's what we should be thinking. It shouldn't be, how dare you, Oren? It should be, oh, wow, Oren, tell us what made you get hit by this. Like, how did you, of all the people and as much experience as you have in this, explain to us how that happened so that we can make sure everybody else thinks about that and looks at it the way that you didn't this time, but maybe you can next time.
He offered me a free t-shirt and I instantly clicked. No.
So now you know how to get in Oren's inbox.
That's right. Swag. But
awesome.
Also, I figured that another reason I submitted for this was that Reynaldo and I gave that talk at OTSecCon about pen testing, conversation between asset owner and pen tester. It's really awesome. But Reynaldo is also super into bringing up the next generation. So, and I wanted to talk about that and then what I'm doing in education and how it all works together.
100%. So definitely let's dive into those. One of the reasons I do this podcast is because of exactly what you just said, Oren, is to give back. We need more and more people coming up, understanding these conversations. So love to dive into those things. So Ray, what are you doing and how are you bringing more and more folks into this space and training and learning and all the goodness that we need, because we need more people?
Yes. Actually, I was talking to Oren about this sometime back and a few others, but so like I aside from being in the field of cybersecurity, architecture, and OT, I also teach classes at Lone Star College. But the class I teach, I've been teaching, I guess you can say, 15 years? Yeah, about a little over 15 years now, and it's more like evening type of adult, mostly adult. Actually, now it's a combination of folks that are either in the field of IT or some kind of cyber, or even non-IT, non-cyber, and people are coming into cyber. I started teaching first on the networking side. I would teach the CCNA, CCNP courses. And then for the past several years, I've been doing now cybersecurity, like fundamentals of cybersecurity, like the CCNA cyber ops course, the ethical hacking course. And those, those courses are taught based on the content from those modules from Cisco and then from the MindTap Cengage program that we use. But it's like, well, when I have some of these conversations with some students, like I did one a few weeks ago, I did a presentation for the college where they want me to talk about cybersecurity and AI. And so just kind of taking the experience of what we go through as cybersecurity leaders and background, and then where AI is at and where it's going, just talking about the pros of how AI cyber kind of mingle and what it does with offensive purposes and defensive purposes, both pros and cons. But the idea there is trying to show students that you don't have to be a lot of exposure in IT or cyber to get into cyber. You just got to have the interest. And that's where I like to really try to help them is, what are you interested in? Like, what are you doing now? Because a lot of the question they give me is, how do I get into cyber and how do I know what I'm like? What of cyber do I do? And how can I learn more about it? And so one of the questions I ask them is, well, what are you doing right now? If it's cyber, great. If it's IT, great. But what do you do? Like, what are you into? What are your hobbies? What do you know about? And based on the response, taking that and say, well, if you think about it, you already know a lot about, let's say building a car. Let's say someone's coming from being a mechanic and they know all these different parts and how they connect. I go, well, can you tell me like what parts are electric that you can configure on this little device? Some kind of, configurable option. Like, well, those are actually related to IT. So if you know the inner workings of being a mechanic and these different, well, you know how it's supposed to work. You know the way, if you do these things right, it does what you expect. And if you mess up here, it's going to break or cause an issue. Well, put your bad guy hat on and say, if I want to be malicious and I want to intentionally break this, I know that I could do X, Y, Z. And you know what works, what doesn't. So cybersecurity is kind of the same thing. You want to know how can you defend and protect something and think like a bad guy that would try to break it, but knowing how they would do it because you have that background. Now you can go into that defensive approach. So if you think about it, you're already in the space. You just got to now learn some of the terminology of the basis of what cybersecurity is, the terms, what is a black and white hat and what is a virus and OT and all these other areas. Just learn some of these concepts, but now you can get into this field of different domains and learn the basics, how these things work with one you already have, and then you just grow and just being able to go through that. So a lot of that from the education side is trying to give them those real life examples and showing them, well, this is how you can easily do it with this part of technology. And then how you get into it. It's just the interest starts here. You got to have that interest because you will struggle. Is it going to be easy? Some yes, some no. Is there a learning curve? Yes, it depends. But as long as you're determined and you're interested, it doesn't matter. You can get them. Everyone can learn tech. But
100%.
from there, you got to build also the social.
You also got youth psychon.
That's true.
Yeah.
Youth
That's
psychon is awesome.
So, and attending those youths is another way to learn.
Well, and as I've built out teams in my past and current even, whether it's at, EY or as an asset owner, like early on when I was an asset owner hiring folks for this OT stuff, OT word didn't exist. And I needed to find people that could fill the roles that I had. So it was really hard to find somebody that had the skill sets that I needed. So I was looking out to skilled, labor type folks, because I'm looking for a mindset. I would rather have a mechanic or an electrician that can problem solve, because a mechanic is good at what? Troubleshooting. Like, you bring in a car, most people don't know what the heck is wrong with it. They're like, I don't know, it's making a noise and it seems weird. And they're having to figure out what the hell that means and deduct what's going on in all these components and systems in this car and say, oh, well, your alternator's out or your front wheel bearing is bad or whatever. Mechanics are great. Amazing troubleshooters. I can teach you technology. It's harder for me to teach you how to troubleshoot. It's harder for me to make you have a questioning attitude. That's something that's very difficult to teach. So somebody that has that as a skill, I can teach you how to subnet and CLI and what commands to do on a firewall and all that type of stuff. It's harder for me to do that mindset of troubleshooting. So finding those people that have that capability doesn't mean that you can't. I'm just saying, if you have that ability already, it doesn't matter what your past is. I can teach you the technology stuff and you'll be really good at it.
That's so true. Never thought of that. That is true.
It's a curiosity.
And it's why Oren, you came from this, right? You started on the operations side and you were troubleshooting. Something's not working. So you're tracing wires and looking at voltages and you're just going through a process. Yeah, there's documentation and things, but a lot of times it's just trial and error. That translates directly to technology. It's just doing it in ones and zeros and bits as opposed to physical wires, but it's the same process mentally.
And that is super addictive, by the way.
It is.
Doing
Yes.
Which leads us to your labs and the things that you're doing, Oren.
Yep.
Yeah, very cool.
In the background.
Yeah, so I got this kit here. If you're watching on video, it's pretty awesome. And so what this kit is I'm building an entire OT system from PLC, wiring, the physical process, all the way up to now I have an Ignition HMI. So that's a Linux server. And then I have network security monitoring on top of that with open source tools, Suricata and Zeek. And then I built industrial DMZ with a firewall and a web proxy. And these are all things that you would find in a real OT environment. And I walk through how to build all this on YouTube live on the work stream. And next week I don't know when, I'm going to do, like you did, a Guacamole remote access server. And then I think I'm going to do Grass Marla, and I'm just going to keep going and going and going with all this stuff. And there's a little cadre of us and we are building these kits together. And so it's like a little community of all kinds of people. It's crazy, the diversity of people. Some of them have been in industry in OT for years. Some of them have been in IT and I want to move over. And some are right in either high school or college. So a wide variety. And I'm getting a lot of joy out of it just because I think when I first started in this career or when I moved into OT cyber, like you're saying, it's hard to find OT cyber people. And it felt good because I was like the one guy with the candle, you know what I mean? I had the light, nobody else did. But our industry is suffering because of that, because you can't really make a big fire when you have one guy with a small candle. But so I think my situation, everybody's situation would be better, even my career wise, if we had more people in OT and more people like Reynaldo at asset owners that understand it. And so that's what I'm trying to do with this kit. And my new favorite thing to say is the most important next gen tool you can have in your business is the next generation of human. And so that's the real next generation. And so I took that picture of me with a bunch of really smart kids at LSU that are all building this kit. And now they're going on to internships and they're starting their career in OT. And another thing I really like about it is it's not a lot of talky. And it's less talk, more walk. So like, I think people are also getting into that. So they like pen testing and they like actually doing stuff, which has been, lacking, I think, a lot of times. We all see like really long PowerPoints and webinars from from vendors and stuff, but I think people are really itching to do something. And this is something you could do for pretty cheap, and it's a lot of fun, and it's all skills that people will pay money for. So
100%. And that's awesome, folks. Like, get in there, look in these in the YouTube, like follow along. There's so much that you can do. Like I'm building them back here a little bit differently, but same type of thing with ICS Village for some trainings that we're looking to do, and have some OT entry level type courses that people can follow along with under the ICS Village nonprofit, kind of brand. Doing those maybe at DEF CON and maybe at, in other places, not quite maybe as hands-on as yours as far as building a PLC, but actually interacting with a pre-built PLC. But it doesn't have to be super expensive. Like the kits, our whole goal is to have the kits like $500 or something like that, right? So something that somebody could get into, they can mess around with Zeek and Suricata and a firewall and understand an HMI and, a little ESP32 that turns on a light or turns on a pump or does something simple. Yes, it's not something you'll see in a plant, but the concept is the same, right? It's using OpenPLC, it's using Modbus, it's using DMP3, like it's using the same types of things that you're seeing in these spaces. I guess our point here is like you've got 3 people on the screen or in your ear that you're listening to. Every one of us is doing, and none of this is my job. It's not necessarily Oren's job. If it is, it's like maybe I'm getting a little bit of something here and there, but that's not the reason we do it. We do it because we want to build that next community. We want the next folks to come behind us because we see, to Oren's point on the fire, we need to pass the baton. We need to pass the torch to the next generation of folks that are coming up behind us, because eventually we're going to have to retire, and who's going to be behind us to take that forward. And hopefully they're in a better place than where we came in, and then we leave it better than when we found it. So that's my spiel. So thank you both for all that you're doing.
Yeah. I was going to say thank you guys, because I got the bug from the ICS Village, walking around and seeing it in real life and being like, oh, that's a city right there. And there's a PLC, and I could just log in and tell that pump to turn on with nothing. That's crazy. Yeah. And yeah. It was really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just really quick, my first time going to DEF CON 2 years ago, I was so overwhelmed with all the different villages. And when I saw the ICS, be like, that's really, I saw the aviation village, all these other ones, the social engineering village was like, it was insane. But that just makes it more interesting. Like you're saying, Aaron, like, we gotta help the next generations to learn this stuff, get interested. And that's also why we're get involved doing these youth programs to get folks in the high school, others in the college to be more into the cybersecurity and then we're very also talking about, we're getting ready to retire, even in the field of these companies, a lot of people there that space of OT have been there for many years that soon they will retire. Who's going to take over their knowledge? We need to be able to transfer that out. We need a lot of that young interest to come into this area to start learning this and take over, because then, we got a lot of critical infrastructure that needs continual protection.
Yeah, absolutely.
No crawling and build is required.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But sometimes that's the fun part. Like we're taking an intern with us to do a client that's doing some really cool stuff like munitions destruction and things like that. So we're going to take an intern that's in college looking at cybersecurity. We're taking them to some field sites, right? And taking them along with us and, put on a hard hat and safety shoes and let's go actually see some real stuff. Like you're going to get dirty, but that's okay. That's part of the fun. That's why I'm always smiling. It's why I have, all the things that we do here. I could be in IT. I could be sitting at a desk and, managing cloud and all that. There's nothing wrong with it. I just really enjoy this. I enjoy, contributing to protecting critical infrastructure and things that are ugly and messy and loud and different. It's just, I caught the bug, kind of like what you said, Oren. Like I really just said, yeah, this is where I need to be.
That's my favorite part, hands down.
Yeah.
Site visits, watching automated frozen pancakes orders and coffee cup fillers and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah. You never know.
I met a guy once, he said, if How It's Made isn't your favorite show, he wouldn't hire you. That's what he said.
Right. That's right.
I want to work for that guy. Well, that is my favorite show.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Or dirty jobs or
dirty jobs. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, awesome, guys. Well, I thank you for your time. I appreciate, again, all that y'all are doing. Definitely reach out to Oren, look at what he's doing, look at what Ray's doing, go take their classes, go dig into the content. Like there's resources out there that are available. You just have to take actions, right? So step in. The opportunity is yours, and there's a great career behind it, but it's not easy. I'm not going to pretend that it is, but it's worth it. It's really valuable, important work, and it's a great community to be part of as well.
Yeah, definitely. Always reach out, message away, LinkedIn message away. So
awesome.
Very happy.
It'll be a happy day when I see your pull request into the GitHub, contributing some of your awesome stuff to make everything better for us.
Exactly.
That's a good part I like. So
yeah, for sure. Well, awesome, gents. Thank you again for joining me. Round 2. I appreciate it. And this time it went well. Good job on the mic. And thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you both. Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on also.
Of course. That's Protected All for this week. One favor, a quick review on Apple or Spotify takes a minute and helps other defenders find the show. New episodes every Monday. Follow wherever you're listening. I'm Aaron Crow. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next week.